Facebook Live today. So today we're going to be talking a little bit more about family dispute resolution and how that could help you, and also how to support kids a little bit through the process of separation and co-parenting. It's something that's never easy to do, but hopefully this might make your life a little bit easier or help you to work out some problems that have been reoccurring in your co-parenting arrangements. So to give you a bit of a background, my name's Tara. I've just started at Women's Health and Wellbeing Service, and I do have a background in family dispute resolution. So I've worked for a number of years helping parents make arrangements for their kids, and how family dispute resolution works is a little bit like being the referee in a boxing tournament. But both of the parents are competing against each other, verbally though, not physically, and your role is just to ensure that the conflict doesn't escalate too much, to keep the conversation on track, and to help the parents explore different options in order to see if they can reach an agreement about what they'd like moving forward. Now, if an agreement is reached, then the family dispute resolution practitioner can write that up, so parents can leave with a written agreement signed and dated by both of them, which will then govern how the parenting can work for them both moving forward. Now, there are a number of reasons why this can be of benefit to you. Now, one of them could be that you've separated either recently or a long time ago, and as of yet, you still don't have arrangements in place for the kids that are formal arrangements. It's quite common that when you're separating, there's a number of things for you to get through. It's often a really emotional time. It can be very stressful. You can be making millions of arrangements for other housing options, looking at getting legal advice about property settlement. It might be making arrangements for the kids' schooling, even just supporting the kids through that cycle. So understandably, making formal arrangements can be the last thing on your mind. For other people, it may have been that an arrangement has been made, but either recently or a while ago, some problems have started to arise, and there are some things that just aren't working for them as well as they would like. So that's where family dispute resolution really can be of benefit to parents, and also to the kids as well. If you come in, it's something that's can be really, really frightening, the idea of, so we often do recommend that it might be worth seeing a counsellor beforehand to have a chat about how you're feeling about it and what's happened in the past. It's something you might also want to do is to see a lawyer before attending family dispute resolution, so you can get some legal advice about your rights, and also discuss whatever the issues are that have either been not going as you'd like, or if it's something new, you can discuss how you can put in place what you would like moving forward. So that's a bit of the background about what to do before family dispute resolution. To give you a bit of an idea about what the next step is after that, is to look at contacting a mediator or a family dispute resolution practitioner. Or it might be that your ex-partner contacts them and then the family dispute resolution practitioner contacts you to see if you want to attend. So essentially you've got to start the ball rolling. Once the ball's rolling, you would go in for an initial 1 hour appointment. That's the opportunity for you to tell your story and for the mediator to ask you questions about what's happened in the past, the safety of the children, looking at the balance of power to make sure it's suitable for both of you to negotiate. They may also ask you some personal questions. So it might be looking at if there's been any violence or conflict in the past of the relationship, maybe asking about any safety concerns you have for the kids. It may also be checking out if you have any health conditions at all that might affect your ability to mediate, and also any mental health issues that have arisen that may be useful for the mediator to know so that they can ensure that it's a safe space for you to be in. During that 1 hour, the mediators can also have a chat to you about what mediation is, how it will work for you, and arrangements they can make for you on the day, so that you don't go in feeling blindsided or not sure about what you're going into. So after that 1 hour appointment, they'll see both of you, yourself and your ex-partner. The next step of the process is to book you both in for the mediation session. So that's the opportunity for both of you to discuss the parenting arrangements. And then if you reach an agreement, get a copy of that agreement written by the mediator. If you have the agreement in place, that's the last step of the process. But if you do wish, you can get that made into a legally binding court order. And you can do that without all of the hassles of the normal court proceedings. What you would do is get the parenting plan made in mediation, and you could speak to a lawyer or you could do it yourself. You could draft that into a Form 11 consent order and then lodge that in the family court. Then all the court really does is stamp that, if they're happy with that and happy that it's in the best interest of the child, and then they'll send a copy back to yourself and your ex-partner. Now, one thing to note is that if you are going down that route, the consent order does need to be signed by both of you. So it does need to be something made by consent or agreement of both of you. So that's an important factor. If a consent order can't be reached because there are things you don't agree about, or in mediation you're not able to reach an agreement, and just so you know, the mediated agreements are generally called parenting plans, so they're not legally binding, but they are that written agreement which is signed and dated. So if you can't reach a parenting plan in mediation or a consent order afterwards, then if necessary you can make an application to the family court. That's something we'd always recommend you get some legal advice about before taking that step. That doesn't mean you need an ongoing lawyer assisting you, but the advice is always helpful so you understand the law behind it and also what your options are. Now, I'm just going to quickly check if we have any comments today. So far it looks like we don't yet, but I will keep an eye on the comments. So if there's anything you'd like to know or anything you're not sure of so far, please do just let me know, and feel free just to comment and I'll be checking those as we go. So far we've gone into the background of what family dispute resolution is, what the role of the family dispute resolution practitioner is, essentially what will happen, the two different options you have about reaching an agreement or not reaching an agreement in family dispute resolution. There's a few other important aspects to know. So one is that it may be the case that mediation or family dispute resolution isn't appropriate in your circumstances. So what that would mean is that maybe because of a history of domestic violence or concerns of safety for the child, it might be mental health issues of one or both of the parties. It might be just other difficulties to communicate and concerns about there being a balance of power. They can be some of the reasons why a mediator may decide that it's not appropriate to proceed. And in that case, you would be eligible for a certificate, which is what enables you to apply to the family court, if that's something you want to do to take the next step. So in some cases, there are still concerns about issues such as domestic violence or safety of the children, but it doesn't necessarily mean that family dispute resolution can't go ahead at all. In those cases, there can be arrangements made to keep the parties safe. A couple of different arrangements are quite common in that space. One might be looking at a shuttle mediation, so that's where you can both come in to negotiate, but you're in different rooms. Another option is doing a phone mediation, so you don't have to be in the same space at all. And the third thing that's quite commonly done is looking at a staggered arrival. So that's making it so you both arrive at different times and you don't get stuck with that awkward period in the waiting room where you're looking at each other or trying not to look at each other or having small chat or just trying to avoid each other totally. That step of the process is just completely removed, so you don't need to worry about it being uncomfortable or awkward or being intimidated by the other party or being at risk of any safety concerns there. So if you do decide to go down the path of family dispute resolution, or maybe your ex-partner contacts the service that contacts you, do keep in mind that you can ask for arrangements to be made to keep you safe, and that is something that does really need to be considered and is a really important consideration in the process. So other than safety issues, there might be other things that the mediators put in place. It could be, if it's, there may be other reasons why just a normal face-to-face mediation where both parties are in the same room doesn't work. It could also be if one party lives really far away in a different state or a long drive from the centre. And that's a space where you could also be looking at doing a phone mediation or a Skype or Zoom mediation too. So keep in mind that the process is quite flexible in a number of ways, and if any of the issues I mentioned are concerns for you, it's a really good idea to bring those up with the family dispute resolution practitioner in your first appointment. So we've gone through a lot of the background on family dispute resolution, and I understand that it is a lot of content and it's not necessarily light content to absorb. So after we've gone through that heavy side of things, I thought that the next part of the session we could have a bit of a look on the children and what's in the best interest of the kids. So to give you a bit of an idea, my background also is in law as well. So I do have some legal knowledge that I'm going to bring forward today. But keep in mind this isn't advice, this is just general information, and if you do require advice, that's where it would be worth contacting a lawyer. So to start off with, most parents love their kids to bits. So what's in the best interest of the kids is really, really important. And from a family law perspective, the best interest of the children is paramount. That's the number one consideration about what should happen. Now, what that looks like from a legal perspective is not necessarily what it looks like in a social perspective. So just to give you an idea of what the law says, the law is looking at both children having a meaningful relationship with both mum and dad and anyone else important in their lives. It could be grandparents, it could be step-parents, it could be uncles and aunties, anyone really that's had a significant role in the child's life. Now that's essential that the child has a meaningful relationship with those people. However, an even more important consideration than that is protecting that child from abuse, neglect, harm, family violence or exposure to family violence. So that would be one circumstance in which that is put above the child having a meaningful relationship with one of their parents or someone else significant to them. Now, just so you know, they're not completely separate issues. Sometimes it can be the case that there are some concerns about the safety of the child, but arrangements can be made so that the child is safe, but they can still have a relationship with both parents. So in those kind of situations, sometimes the court might look at things like supervised contact. So they're ensuring that that kid is safe because that's the number one priority, but also allowing them to have some sort of relationship with the person that they're not living with. So after the primary considerations, which are the two I've just mentioned, the court considers a number of other factors. It can be cultural connection, in particular connection to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. It's very important. Looking at the age, sex and maturity of the children and the parents. Might be looking at the children's wishes. And just a little side note on the children's wishes. These are things that are important when considering the child's best interest, but it's not solely considered until the child's a lot older. So it's not until the child's 16 or even 18 in some cases, where it would be solely based on what the children want. Under those ages, the children's views are always considered, but it is taken into account that children don't necessarily have the maturity at all ages to completely decide on what the best arrangements are for them. So, for example, a 3-year-old may have some preferences about who they spend time with, but you don't necessarily want to let the 3-year-old make the decision. One, because it's a really difficult decision to make when a 3-year-old loves both of their parents, but also it's because they might consider things that aren't necessarily in their best interest, like the fact that they get ice cream every night at one house. So a 3-year-old might make the decision solely on the ice cream, which is not necessarily in their best interest, which is why the children's wishes are considered, but it's not the sole consideration in determining best interest. Now, other factors that are considered as well are looking at how the children have had a relationship with both parents in the past and other people as well, and not wanting to change the status quo too significantly to disrupt the children. It might also be looking at the parents' involvement with the children in the past, big decision making about the children, the parents' ability to maintain the children, and what they've done in the past to financially support the child and support the child in other ways. So essentially their attitude towards parenting and what they've done in the past to be a parent to that child will be considered by the court as well. There are a few other factors, but I won't go through the whole list at this stage because it can be something that's just too much information to process at once. If that's something you do need more information about, there are a number of really useful fact sheets online that you can have a look at and get that information from. So the last thing I want to discuss today is looking at what are some do's and do nots that are recommended for co-parenting children. Some of these are real common sense, so this doesn't necessarily mean it's something everyone needs to work on, but co-parenting is really hard, so it's always useful getting tips and tricks and just reminding yourself on good behaviours. So to start off the list, this one can seem quite obvious, but not speaking negatively about the other parent or even the other parent's extended family in front of the children, and also extending that to in earshot of the children. Children often hear a lot more than the parents think that they do. They're quite good at eavesdropping conversations. So if you are speaking negatively about the other parent or thinking about speaking negatively about the other parent, it's something that's always recommended to do when the children aren't around at all. So for example, if you're talking to a friend, it might be better to do that when the children are at school. So there's no risk of them overhearing that negativity. And even though it can be really hard not to be negative towards the other parent when a lot emotionally has happened in the past, and there may have been some betrayals, lots of conflict or even ongoing conflict. You might feel that you've been let down or betrayed, or that you get lumped with all of the hard work out of the parenting. And even though your feelings are really valid in those circumstances, and it's not saying that what you're feeling isn't 100% true, a lot of the research these days shows that there's not really any benefit for the children hearing those negative things about the other parent. Something that kids are really smart and they will figure out on their own which of the parents is reliable and which of the parents supports their best interests. And at the end of the day, most kids want to have a positive relationship with their parents and also feel loved by both parents and not feel like they have to choose between both parents. So the more positive you can be to the children, the better. The next point today is not to get the kids to relay messages. When you're looking at relaying messages, it may even be simple things like pick-up drop-off times. It's much better for parents to discuss these directly or discuss it through a third-party adult who has the maturity and also the emotional resilience to process whatever communications might come both ways. And the reason that they often say not to communicate through the children is because it's something that can be really stressful for the kids. And it can make it difficult because the kids will also be receiving the responses from both parents. So if any of the responses are negative, so for example, because the pickup time's been pushed back an hour and the other parent's upset it's later, then rather than that negative feedback coming to the parent, it's going to the child and it's going to be affecting them. And they've got to absorb that negativity. The next point is try not to make the kids choose unless absolutely necessary. So don't make them choose between mum or dad, or continuously make decisions about who they want to be with or where they want to be each night of the week. It's good to get the kids' opinions, and if it's something that the child brings to you that's really important to them, that's great. Or giving the child the opportunity to ask them if there's any changes that they want made to the parenting arrangements. There are really positive ways of integrating what the child wants and getting their opinion, but it's doing it in a way that doesn't make them feel pressured to pick or choose between the parents. So it's much better to ask them in general about what changes they'd like, or if there's any important events coming up for them that they'd like to go to at the other parent's house, rather than saying, do you want to be with mum or dad? Or do you prefer mum or dad? Or do you want to go to dad's birthday party or mum's birthday party? Because if the kids have to choose, that's a really stressful decision for them often. And it can be something as well that they don't always feel comfortable enough to bring forward what they actually want. So even though parents often feel like the kids are just saying what they want, quite often it's the case that the kids will just be trying to please the parents. So it backfires a little bit if you're trying to let the kids choose so that they can get what they like. Keep in mind that, if you're asking the kids for a decision, to do that in a way that they don't have to choose between both parents. And also so that they're not left with the burden of the decision making. Now, to give you a bit of an example of why that can be really difficult is from my personal circumstances. My parents separated when I was at a really young age. And even though my parents are quite amicable and got on quite well, when it came to last year, my brother was getting married. And even at 24, it was a really hard decision about which parent I wanted to stay with for the wedding. So that's an example of, even as a mature adult who's quite separate from my parents, picking is always hard. So let alone if you're asking a 5-year-old to make that decision, it's something that can be almost impossible for them to choose when they really love both parents. The next tip today is this is a hard one to do. So it's something that if you're not ready yet, you can always put it on the to-do list for later. But if you can, it can be great to speak positively about the other parent. So that's praising them wherever they do good things, or it might be mentioning to the child, you have a really good sense of direction, just like your dad. So it's making the kid feel good about themselves and also about their parents. One thing parents often forget is that a child is made up of half of you and half of the other parent. So if they're constantly told that the other parent is no good, then that can reflect poorly on their sense of self-esteem, because sometimes what they can feel is that they're being told that half of them is no good because they're half of that parent that's a dropkick or useless. So the more you can create that positivity about the other parent, that can have a lot of benefits for your child, as difficult as it can be to do. Next tip for today is to avoid arguing in front of the children. That can seem like it's quite obvious, but it is something that's much easier said than done. And what I often recommend is discussing with your ex-partner about techniques for having those difficult discussions. And maybe it's even something that you could have a procedure in place about if something's escalating towards the stage of conflict, what you do in those circumstances. So it might be if it's a changeover, sensitive topic comes up, and you notice that both of your voices are escalating a little bit, and you feel like one of you is about to explode. It might be having a shared phrase that you both use in those circumstances to say, look, I think we do need to discuss this, but now isn't a great time. Can we discuss this later? And meeting at a time when the children aren't around to have that conversation. This has two benefits. One is it allows sometimes for the discussion to die down. It gives parents the security of knowing that the topic will be discussed and it's not something that's constantly going to be avoided, because that can breed a lot of resentment and anger between the parents if you're not, if topics are constantly just being avoided. And it also has the benefit as well of pushing that conversation to a space that the children don't have to hear the conflict, because the conflict is something that can really negatively affect your kids. It can make them really sad and upset and angry, or even if they don't show that they're visibly upset, it's still a difficult thing for them to process and observe. Now, a couple of other ideas today is, one of them is looking at what to do if your child is missing the other parent, or maybe if they're worried about missing you when they're going to the other parent. So one thing you could do there is reminding the child, you're going to be with dad in 3 sleeps, or it's only 2 sleeps before you come back to mum's house. And you can sometimes use visual aids to help the child, so it might be creating a calendar where you cross off the days so they can see how close they are to spending time with dad or mum. Another idea as well is if the child is really missing the other parent, it can be making a gift or a picture or getting them to write a letter to the other parent, so that they don't feel so much like they're missing the other parent, or they have a way of expressing how they're feeling, if they're feeling sad or feeling lonely or just generally missing them. It's a positive way for the child to process that, and you're teaching them good skills that they can use for the rest of their life. So once again, I understand that a lot of these are really more difficult to implement in life than they are just to say, but if you can, it's great if you can support the child with the emotions that they're experiencing when they're missing the other parent, and reminding them that they're going to see them soon, helping them to make a nice gift or draw a picture, so that at the end of the day your child can feel less sad and more happy, because the most important thing is the children. Now, just to go through the last couple of tips, communication is obviously a key. So the more you can communicate with the other parent, the better, because often the more communication you can have, the better you can resolve issues and the better you can make arrangements for the kids. And where it comes to communication, also the more you can create the space for the child to have communication with the other parent, the better. Just to put in an afterthought for that, some of these tips don't always apply in circumstances of domestic violence. So do keep that in mind, that that may not be the benefit for the kids then to have a relationship or regular communication with the other parent if there's big safety concerns there. But these tips are generally designed where you don't have those severe safety concerns for the children. So if there's not the concerns for domestic violence, that's where it can be really great for the child to have, for example, a phone that they can communicate just with the other parent, or regular video calls, or letting the child know that at any point they can ask you to speak to the other parent and you'll call them. And it's something that can really help a lot if the parents remind their children, because the children pick up on all of the micro expressions that you have. And what that can mean is that sometimes if they want to speak to the other parent, but they notice if they ask, you get a little bit less happy, maybe a little bit more upset, a little bit more serious, and they can just sense that that's something that you don't feel positively about, even if you don't think you're giving off any of those signs. But the more you can create the space for them and really reinforce that it's okay for them to call the other parent, the better. So it could even be saying to them, it's been a while since you've seen mummy or daddy, would you like to give them a call tonight? I can get the phone if you like. So creating those pathways for communication. And for older kids, it might be, if you want to also reduce the amount of communication you have to have with the other parent yourself, could be getting them their own phone. And even if that's just connected to the Wi-Fi, you don't need a SIM card or worry about extra expenses for that. But just a really simple phone that they can use to FaceTime or Facebook the other parent whenever they want. So there's some ideas where it comes to communication. The last tip I'll probably leave you on today is looking at essentially keeping the other parent in the loop about what's happening with the child. You can have a communication book for that. Could be texts. You can use a parenting parenting app to keep each other updated. And it's really important to keep the other parent in the loop so that the child or children have the best care that they possibly can. And this can be things like keeping them in the loop about if one child needs some medication because they've been unwell. It might be if they have a really important event coming up, or there's preparation that needs to be done for something, even like a fashion carnival, just to ensure that both parents are on the same page and that they're not missing out on key information that would be useful to know for the parenting. So what we've gone over is just some tips and tricks for co-parenting, some things to think about and reflect upon if there's anything that you want to change in your current approach, or pat yourself on the back of the things that you're doing well. So just to summarise today, we've gone through family dispute resolution, what that is essentially, and just to recap, that's a way for you to resolve any issues in relation to parenting and parenting arrangements with the help of a neutral third-party mediator who's there to reduce conflict and to keep the conversation on track. Now, to give you an idea of what you can discuss, you could look at the time the children spend with both parents, could be looking at communication, special occasions, schooling, living arrangements, religion, travel, special occasions, and really anything else that you need to discuss to make the parenting arrangements work for both of you. Now, to recap a little bit about our parenting do's and don'ts and tips for success, essentially try not to speak badly about the other parent, and if you can, speak positively. That's incredible if you can do that, just to make the child feel good about themselves and both of their parents. Don't get the kids to relay messages if you can avoid it, and try not to make the children choose between each parent or make difficult choices about parenting arrangements, which are things that may be more easily and less stressfully made by the parents. Avoid arguing in front of the children, and if you do have issues that may create conflict, maybe look at getting a conflict resolution method in place or arrangement so that when it comes to a situation where conflict arises, you both know what the best way would be to resolve that, and you've pre-agreed about how that will look like. So hopefully that matter can be resolved away from the children with as little stress and negativity for both of you as possible. If the kid's missing the other parents, you might want to look at reassuring them about how many nights until they see the other parent, or maybe encouraging them to do something for the other parent, draw a nice picture, make a gift. And it could also be looking at asking them if they want to have some communication with the other parent, or could even be looking at extra parenting time. So if it's going to be a while until they see the other parent, it might be asking them, would you like to see if daddy or mummy would like to take you for ice cream after school this week, or take you to the park? And arranging that to see if that's something that would also work for the other parent, so your child can have the benefit of that extra happy time with the parent that they're not with at that stage, and minimise the amount that they're missing each of the parents when they're not with them. Now, that's summarised the tips we've gone through today, and also summarised family dispute resolution. If you do need family dispute resolution, there's a number of places that offer it around Perth, and that are free or low cost. So you can look at Anglicare, Centre Care, Relationships Australia, Citizens Advice Bureau, and also Gosnells Community Legal Centre. They're all places that can assist you with resolving those disputes about parenting. And just so you all know as well, if you're having disputes about settling the property after separation, a lot of the mediation centres can also assist you with that to avoid really lengthy court battles and expensive lawyer fees as well. Now, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you do have any questions, feel free to comment on them, and we can address that in one of our later Facebook Live posts. Or also, if there's any topics that you're interested in learning about, we're always interested in getting some feedback and some ideas, so also feel free to comment those on the link. Thanks for joining.